Climb into the cockpit with pilot and Link Square's Chief Legal Officer, Tim Perilla, as he invites legal leaders aboard to share advice that will help you navigate even the most turbulent times of in-house counsel work. We'll cover a range of topics from data privacy to legal team structure to public company transactions and beyond. You don't want to miss this series. Fasten your seatbelt and prepare for takeoff. You're listening to Cockpit Counsel.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Cockpit Counsel. My name's Tim. I'm the Chief Legal Officer at Link Squares. As always, we have our producer, Alyssa Frazzino, and today we are joined by Rob Chesnut. Rob, welcome.
Tim, thanks for having me here.
Thanks for coming on. It's great to have the chance to sit down and chat a little bit. So, tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, your career, and what you're doing now.
I'm a lawyer. Shocking. I was a federal prosecutor early in my career.
Yeah.
In Virginia, I prosecuted spy cases, but also drug dealers, bank robbers, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But we had tech in our jurisdiction. AOL, if people remember AOL, they actually were in Northern Virginia.
Okay.
So I got a little bit involved in tech, ended up moving to the West Coast to be at eBay. Ran their trust and safety department and ran North America Legal.
Yeah.
And then later became general counsel at Chegg and general counsel and chief ethics officer at Airbnb.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We start every episode the same way.
All right.
All right. What is your pre-flight ritual?
Before getting on an airplane.
Before getting on an actual airplane.
So before I get on an airplane, I learned over the years, I worked with global companies, and flights can last longer than you expect, and I get hungry. So my pre-flight ritual is to make sure I've got an emergency sandwich or something that if you assume that something goes wrong or the food they've got is terrible or they don't have any food at all, I'm at least going to make it through. I'm not going to starve. That's my ritual.
Nice. So I running from being a federal prosecutor all the way through Airbnb, a bunch of stuff in between. What was your favorite part about being a federal prosecutor first?
Wow, favorite part, you certainly got to meet people in life you didn't ordinarily run into. Right? It was I think broadening horizons.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed the fact that I was learning about world and cultures that I never really would otherwise get exposed to. I also love the responsibility. Yeah. I think I had a lot of friends in law school who were at big firms and they were doing document searches and document productions and the like. And I got to stand up in court and try cases in front of juries, which I thought, that was pretty cool. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that something that you missed when you ended up going into tech, going in-house?
No, I got it out of my system.
All right.
Jury trials were a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But you know what? I've enjoyed deals more in terms of I enjoyed settling cases.
Right.
Because when you settle a case with a defendant, you can get cooperation.
Right.
The person can help work off their sentence and have a better result for them.
Right.
And I really find that I enjoy situations where they're win-win.
Yeah.
And if you go to trial, that means that the individual is gambling everything, and they're going to lose in most cases.
Yeah.
And they're going to go to jail. A young person's going to go to jail for a long period of time. That wasn't as satisfying, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So that was something that, when it came to moving over to the business world, I was actually kind of looking forward to that. I like this concept of working collaboratively together to come up with a result that works for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Was that something that early on in your career, like right when you started as a federal prosecutor, was that a mindset that you had where it's like these people are risking everything? How did you think about how you conduct yourself knowing that?
Well, you have to be careful. You represent the United States. You're with the Justice Department. So you always have to make sure that you are comporting yourself in a way that you're going to be proud of, and that you don't want anyone to ever feel you want justice to be done.
Yeah.
In that sense, that means you can't be in a winning mentality 100% of the time. You've actually trying to get to a result that you feel good about and that the public would feel good about if they were familiar with the situation. So I think that was important to me in going through that process of, because there are some people, I think, who are prosecutors, all they care about is winning.
Right.
And
it's a dangerous spot to be in.
Which is, it was interesting. The person that I ended up running the major crimes unit, the person that ran the major crimes unit before I did, ended up getting accused of withholding exculpatory material. A judge found that he had done so, and ended up wrecking his career. So then the office turned to me and said, all right, now you're running the major crimes unit. So I think it was it weighed heavily on me in light of what happened to my predecessor, just to make sure I wanted the judges to have confidence that when I stood up in front of them, that they could rely on my word, that they had confidence that I was really trying to do the right thing. I wanted the defense bar to feel that way about me as well. Because you got to, in order to work out deals and plea agreements, they've got to trust that you're going to follow through on your end. So I spent a lot of time thinking about that sort of thing, I think, as a prosecutor.
The reason I asked that you get into that a little bit is obviously you wrote a book about intentional integrity, and it seems like that's a really good place where, and honestly, a great example, their predecessor didn't really have much integrity at all. And this was something that obviously shaped whether you specifically called it out at that time and had that an area of mental focus or not. It's obviously something that shapes your entire career.
I never thought that much specifically about, I never thought I'd write a book about integrity, for example, in business. But I think back about it. My mom, a lot of times it comes from when you're really young. And I had this story, I relate this in the book of, I have this memory of being young, going to a grocery store with my mom. And I remember we were out in the parking lot, putting the groceries in the car, and my mom looked at me suddenly and she said, we've got to go back inside. What are we going back inside for? So I follow my mom inside. My mom goes to the cashier. And I remember my mom had money and gave the cashier some money. And I asked my mom, what's going on? And my mom said, she gave us the wrong change. She gave us too much change. And it really struck me that we were going out of our way to do that. And the older I got, the more I realized that, it's really easy to rationalize. It would have been very easy for my mom to say, oh, we spend a lot of money at that store anyway, or their groceries are so expensive, or I'm not going back in. But doing the right thing was important to my mom. And it was like a life lesson. And from that time on, it was just a commitment I made to myself. You know what? If I ever leave a store accidentally without paying for something, or I get the wrong change, I'm going to follow my mom's example. And so, it's in a way, it's kind of woven through what I've done in my life, and I think it started a lot with the way I was raised.
So, and carried all the way through now in a very meaningful, material way, which is great. So let's talk a little bit about your time at Airbnb, and would love to hear, some of the takeaways. Really interesting company, interesting story. I remember seeing the, I don't know if it was a meme or what it was at the time, talking about the world's largest transportation company doesn't own any cars. The world's largest real estate company doesn't own any real estate. Talking about Airbnb and Uber, obviously. But would love to hear.
I was used to this because my first jaunt into the corporate world was eBay. And we sold.
Sold a bunch of stuff you don't own.
We didn't have a warehouse. We didn't own anything, but we were selling more ends than anyone else. And I like that as a business model. Obviously, It's great if you can make money connecting people. And I always love that idea. It's sort of a common thread for me in my career is I love the idea of connecting people over common interest. And because I actually think it makes the world a better place. If you can actually get to know somebody in a different part of the country or a different part of the world, do business with them over some sort of a common interest, it makes the world a little bit of a smaller place. And the internet, we hear so much today about the bad in the internet. And I think it has had some negative consequences for society. But I believe in its good and the power of good that it has. And I think this notion of connecting people is really powerful. And so for me, that was really attractive about Airbnb. It wasn't just about an empty space, taking advantage in a utilitarian way of an empty space. It was about connecting people. And that's the way the founders looked at it, and that's the way everybody in the company acted. Everybody in the company talked about how many connections are we making, as opposed to
That's
just
cool.
how many rooms are we filling, right?
Yeah.
And I think it inspired everything that we did with a sense of purpose that made it. The hours were tough, but it didn't seem quite as much like work when you're working towards something that you believe in.
Yeah, absolutely. When you have a mission that you can get behind and internalize on a personal level, it makes work a lot less like work and a lot more like something that you do, right?
It becomes a life purpose. It ties into your purpose, why you exist. It very much ties into who you are.
Yeah.
And if it's going to be who I am, I want it to be more than just about money. By the way, I think this is not unusual today. I think more and more when I talk to younger people, everybody wants a paycheck, but they want more than a paycheck. Right. They want to feel like they're coming to work every day, changing the world, and advancing something in a way that is consistent with their own values.
Yeah, absolutely. So you wrote Intentional Integrity. What does integrity mean to you?
Well, that's what's an interesting question. And I think that you added the words, what does integrity mean to me?
Yeah.
And the integrity is not some concept out there that is fixed that everyone agrees on. We've all got our own definition of integrity, and it's all based on how we were raised, what's the culture of the place that we come from, what's our religion, what are our life experiences. And as a result, as we go through life, and have these life experiences, it forms in each of us our principles, our values, and what we think is right or wrong.
Right.
So it's possible for the two of us to look at the same issue and violently disagree about it. For us both to have integrity. But I think it's about forming your North Star, your principles, your values, and then once you form them, acting in accordance with them. Yeah. Even when it's hard, even when it might not necessarily appear to be in your best short-term interest, still doing it, even if nobody's watching.
Right. Right.
But it's about, I think, having the firmness of a belief in something and belief in what it's right. Now, there's another aspect to it, on the other hand, and that is you can't be too stubborn and fixed either.
Right.
But there's an aspect to integrity of being able to recognize when you're wrong.
Right.
Being able to look at yourself and say, I made a mistake.
Right.
Or having the self-awareness to evolve and realize, I used to think that. But I think you want to get it right, not be right all the time.
Yeah.
And so integrity is something that can evolve as well. And I think it's important for all of us to be open-minded and be willing to think through things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Alyssa, what about you?
I would say integrity means acting with strong morals and in a way that you're proud of, but also being honest with the people around you about what that means to you, so that they would notice maybe too if something was a little bit off there and they know your morals.
Right. It's interesting when you say that noticing people around you. When I was doing the book, I spent some time at Duke University with a guy, Dan Ariely, who's a behavioral psychologist. And one of the things that he taught me is that integrity is actually contagious. Yeah. And that, we all want to feel good about ourselves as human beings. Mm-hmm. And we're inspired by people around us. Mm-hmm. And if people around us act with integrity and we see that they do it, it actually makes us, a little bit like, well, I'm a good person, and it inspires you as well. And the people that have the biggest impact, the carriers of integrity, are leaders, right? Because everybody looks up to the person who's been successful in their career and they're doing well. And so if a leader acts with integrity, that permeates the culture. In the book, I talk about this idea where the leader is a thermostat, not a thermometer, right? A thermometer takes the temperature of a room, but a thermostat sets it. And by the way a leader talks and behaves, they're actually kind of creating a climate that everybody in the company, right, is living in and is affected by. So that's one of the things I kind of like about integrity. I think it's not just about you, but it's also about people around you.
Mm-hmm. Being able to create that sort of universal sense of what is, what is the set of behaviors that is core to your organization, I think is really important. That what are those things that really align with the the sense of the collective sense of integrity across the organization.
Right. Well, it's part of this whole amorphous concept of culture.
Right.
Right. What's the culture of your organization? And the culture is so often defined by founders and leaders in the company, and the way and everybody's watching. Integrity today, I say that it's what you do when no one's watching, but everybody's always watching. And we live in a very transparent world. People can instantly communicate problems that they see. And so you have to understand that as a leader, that you're under the microscope. And you have to embrace it. I think it's harder to be a leader than ever these days, in part because everybody's watching you, and people love reading negative stories online.
Yeah.
And so somebody can take a shot at you. It might not even be fair, but they're going to take that. They're going to take the shots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No one clicks on the headline that says the company did the right thing.
No,
Right.
it's true. Unfortunately, I think you're right.
I mean, I try to just in the hopes
Just
that
to
maybe
fool the algorithm.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, oh, he's a really positive person. That's great. Yes. So within an organization, what role can in-house legal teams play in creating a culture where you're exercising the highest level of integrity, your ethical compass is dialed in?
Well, I mean, I think of any organization in a company, it's probably legal and HR, I think, are the two that have the biggest impact on the ethical nature of the company, that and the leaders, right? Too often, people don't talk about integrity in a company, because I think part of it is because none of us are perfect.
Right.
But integrity is not about being perfect, right? It's about being able to recognize when you go off track and get yourself back on track again, and trying to live according to certain values. But I think what in-house can do is they can talk about the importance of integrity. And often what you hear from lawyers is they talk about compliance,
Yeah.
right? And compliance is very important, but compliance is doing something because you're forced to do it, because the law says you've got to do it, right? Or legal says you've got to do it.
Right.
What I think in-house lawyers can do is they can broaden things a little bit. They talk about compliance, but I think they've also got to talk a little bit about doing the right thing because it's the right thing.
Right.
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 And if you can help instill a culture of integrity in your company, you actually make your compliance program better.
Yeah.
Because now people are doing the compliance not just because the law says it and because they're forced to do it, but because it feels like the right thing and it speaks to their own values.
Yeah.
And I think in-house lawyers can play a leading role in instilling that culture by talking about it and encouraging other leaders in the company to talk about it.
So one of the things that we talk about a good bit here on Cockpit Counsel is managing up. And integrity it's one thing to manage up from a compliance perspective. It's another thing to manage up from an integrity perspective. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of your experiences, or maybe you've been fortunate enough to not ever have to do that?
Oh no, you have to.
Right.
all of us have an integrity moment.
Yeah.
At a company, probably every few weeks, and the shame is if you miss the integrity moment, right? We're all tested, and there are always moments like that. I think one of the things that I found is more effective is to be proactive, in that I think a lot of times lawyers are tempted to hide under the desk and think, oh, I hope nothing goes wrong today.
Right.
I hope there are no problems. They see the headlines from other companies about what leaders have done, and they're like, oh, I hope it doesn't happen here. What I think is important for lawyers to understand is that you can affect that environment by being proactive and talking about it. So I'll give you a couple of examples. When Me Too started happening, one of the things I did is we had executive team meetings. And so I blocked off some time on the executive team calendar to talk about it.
Right.
And I talked about a few of the headlines, including consensual relationships with leaders and people on staffs. Yeah. And I asked the question, I said, should any of us as executive team members have a romantic relationship with someone at the company?
Right.
Right. And we had a little discussion about it. And I said, perhaps in light of all this happening, why don't we all agree that we're just not going to go there?
Right.
Is that something we really need to do? And I remember somebody in the room said, "Oh, Rob, we're all married or in relationships anyway." and I said, "And that doesn't seem to stop people, does it?" And everybody laughed. And then we went around the room, each of us, and everybody said, "I'm in."
Yeah.
And what the significance of that is, it's if no one ever talks about it, it's easy to sort of rationalize, and to sort of fall into it.
Yeah.
Everybody in that room understood that if they went that way now, they were violating their word to the rest of the people on the team, which, by the way, would mean they were probably going to be having to leave the company.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
So we had having a proactive discussion about how are we going to handle this issue.
Yeah.
And I would have every 6 months, I would have 30 minutes on one-on-one with every other member of the executive team.
Yeah.
And the purpose of the 30 minutes was really an integrity check-in.
Okay.
And it was a reminder. I might even have a couple of headlines from things that had happened at other companies.
Right.
Around, it could be financial irregularities, it could be sexual misconduct, or in the like. And just talk about a few things that had happened at other places. Ask them if they had seen anything on their team that concerns them and the like.
Right.
And the reason I did this with leaders are particularly susceptible to integrity problems.
Yep.
Why? Well, it turns out, scientifically, that if you've been successful in business, you've been successful in your career, it actually lulls you into a sense of security and even a little bit of an arrogance that I've always been able to manage every situation.
Yeah.
Right? I've got a certain amount of power, and that entitles me to act a particular way.
Right.
Simply talking to other leaders about this. Just say, look, you are more susceptible, leader, than the average employee to this type of a problem, unless you're aware of it, unless you're on guard about it.
Yep.
So we're going to take a few minutes every now and then. We're just going to talk about it. We're going to have check-ins, and we're going to remind each other about this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Because this is career-altering, potentially brand-altering, the sort of things that can happen. I mean, you and I, we could sit here and talk about 20, 30, 50 companies where we've seen blow-ups with brands around this sort of thing.
Yep.
And so for me, I felt like as the lawyer, it was up to me to grab this a little bit.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, it's supposed to be my responsibility to protect against risk.
Sure.
Integrity-related issues among leaders, significant risk to companies.
Yes, it is.
It takes 30 minutes here and there. It takes a conversation at an executive team meeting. But by doing it, I think you can insulate yourself a little bit, and you can be proactive, and you're less likely to have problems.
It seems like an opportunity to be a little bit vulnerable yourself as well, and help to build those relationships across the organization, right?
Sure. I mean, we've all made mistakes. We've all done things that are wrong. And so just having an honest conversation about the temptations to do things that are wrong, maybe it's a business target. I'll give you a great example. We cleared this. I could talk about this Airbnb story. I get to the company, and we had this business goal. We were going to hit 200 million nights this particular year.
Yeah.
Okay. 200 million nights. I'm thinking it's a lot of nights.
Holy
cow.
cow.
A lot of nights. But everybody in the company is aligned around it. And it was something that I talk about in the book, this notion of it's the number on the wall.
Right.
So whenever you went to a company meeting, there it was on the slides.
Yeah.
Right. Every time you saw a slide deck around what the company goals were and stuff. 200 million nights. I think about 200 million nights. That sounds perfectly reasonable. We can hit the number. And then one day I was looking on the site, and I noticed there were some hosts that had bad reviews. Like out of 5 stars, they were averaging 3 stars, which is, as we know, that's not very good.
Right.
In the online review world. And I looked at the reviews, and they were things like they weren't the pictures of the residents were misleading.
Okay.
The places weren't clean.
Okay.
The guests weren't being greeted. The Wi-Fi might not be working, and that sort of stuff, right? So I find the team that's responsible for this. I go and say, hey, look, why? There's this host and this host and this host. These reviews are terrible. So these people are going to kill our business.
Yeah.
Why aren't we removing them from the site?
Yeah.
Never forget it. Guy looks at me and says, well, Rob, you're right, but even a bad night is still a night, and we need to hit 200 million.
Yeah.
And it hit me.
Yeah.
Right? And immediately, next executive team meeting, we had a long conversation about it. I said, you know what, this idea of a number on the wall, this idea that there's a business goal that's so powerful that everyone is lined up against it, it can actually cloud out doing the right thing.
Right.
And that becomes doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So, for me, there's nothing wrong with goals. They're obviously really important to a lot of people, but you've got to also make sure that everybody understands that nothing clouds out doing the right thing. And if it's leading us in a bad direction, then somebody's got to have the courage to raise their hand and say, you know what, this isn't healthy. So in that particular case, we simply changed the number to good nights. So a night didn't count unless it was a 5-star night.
Okay.
Now we were all aligned around doing the right thing for the business in the long term. But you got to be careful when you set those goals because they could be powerful motivators for people.
Well, especially when you start looking at people who are, in different types of business. Well, I don't know about folks at Airbnb. I don't know about your pay structure there, but like people who are commission based, where their pay is incentivized on targets like that. Those are areas where you have massive potential for people to drift away.
Look at Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo had a terrible scandal where, at its root, it came from the sales team. They were told that they had to increase the number of accounts per account holder. Like credit card, savings account, checking account, mortgage, car loan, all that, right?
Right.
And the goal was 8. 8 is great, but became their slogan. Okay. And the sales team was told, if you don't hit your targets, you'll be working at McDonald's next month.
Wow.
Those exact words, right, that came out. Now, when you're told that you're going to be working at McDonald's next month, right, if you don't hit a number, that will incent people to do really just about anything. And that's what happened. The Wells Fargo sales team started opening up accounts for people who didn't even ask for the accounts to be open. And people were being charged fees on accounts they didn't even know existed. They were phony accounts. So I think just being aware of the incentive structure that you've got and what you've created, and making sure that people are always incented to do the right thing.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah, exactly. It's, I can't even imagine I can't imagine any manager anywhere using that kind of language with I oversee HR, and like, if there were a manager within this organization that was like, you're going to be working at McDonald's, it's so far from the right way to motivate your staff.
But there are going to be people who are listening to this episode, Tim, who work in an environment where the leader says, we are going to hit this number no matter what. I don't care how you get it done. Just come back and tell me that you've done it. And unfortunately, that's the way that some leaders operate. And they think that's leadership. Yeah. And that's not leadership, right? I think great leadership inspires people to hit goals. It doesn't set goals that are entirely unrealistic, and it doesn't ever put anybody in the position of, if you miss something despite your best efforts, you could be out on the streets, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think about setting goal setting is an important tool, and I think it's an important tool more for accountability and less for motivation, right? Like the more that I think about how you, yes, it's good for people to rally around a goal, but just a goal without the integrity to how you reach it, it really loses basically all meaning, right?
Ben Horowitz, I sat down with him for the book. Yeah. And he told me when he was CEO, every quarter when he would sit down with the CFO, they had the numbers in front of them. Yeah. And he would always look at the CFO and say, is everything in these numbers, everything in these sheets, is it accurate? Is there anything in here that's misleading? Right. Is there anything in here that you felt forced to put in that you're uncomfortable with? Because he would say, we might miss a number. Our stock price might go down. Yeah. But we're not going to lie. We're not going to cheat. We're not going to break the law. Yeah. And just taking the moment to have that exercise each time sends a powerful message about the kind of company that you want to operate. Then you can push. Then you can talk about how could we do a better job to hit numbers and the like. But you've always got to have that base of, we're not going to lie. We're not going to cheat. We're not going to mislead people. We're going to follow the law.
Right. And I think even for smaller organizations, as you look toward, So whether it's the SEC or whether it's your own board of directors, everybody has a boss. Everyone has managers. And I feel like people who try to obfuscate stats that are bad, whatever they are, not only is that almost always very easily discovered, right? But what it shows, even above and beyond like a lack of integrity, is and above and beyond the breaking of that trust that you should have between the leadership and the board, it shows an unwillingness to change what you're doing, which perhaps if I'm a board member or an investor is even worse. Like, okay, even if you had told me the truth and the trust was there and you didn't cover anything up, you're still not doing anything about it. Like, why didn't you hit the number? Why, like, what's going on? It's like, oh, well, we'll overcome it in the next quarter, or we'll overcome it in the back half of the year, whatever it may be. And it's like, all right, well, probably not. If you keep doing the same thing, like you're not taking any ownership, any accountability.
I always felt better when I heard somebody telling me that something didn't go right.
Yeah, because it's something to fix.
I love the transparency. You build trust when you talk openly about something that hasn't worked. And I agree with you that once you've confronted it, that's the first step to actually getting the problem fixed, as opposed to obfuscating it and kind of pretending it's not there.
That's exactly it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And also, so there are many situations where it's not exactly clear what's right versus wrong to do. So what advice would you have for listeners that are facing a situation similar to that?
Yeah, early in my career, I was put in a position where I was making some decisions like that myself. At eBay, for example, I was responsible for being the decider of what you could sell on eBay. Right? Which, it felt like an awesome task at the time. Now I realize it was not an awesome task. It was an impossible task. With the laws being different everywhere all over the world. And not just laws, but there were some questions about if something's legal, should you still sell it? Mm-hmm. So they would come to me. Customer support would say, well, we've got complaints about this. We've got complaints about that. Should we allow it? And I would, say yes or no. They came to me one day with, there was an item. A guy had gone to the Vatican to get communion from the Pope. And he takes the wafer from the Pope. you already know where this is going. No. He takes the wafer, instead of putting it in his mouth, he puts it in his pocket and puts it on eBay. So they come to me. The item's now up for auction on eBay. And they come to me and say, well, we've got some complaints. What should we do? Well, I wasn't Catholic. I looked at it like, well, it's a wafer. Right? It's a wafer. Pope gave it to him.
Right.
If somebody wants to buy this wafer, let them do it. Right. Well, I lacked the full appreciation for the gravity of the situation. Several days later, I get called into the CEO's office to explain why the Catholic Church has initiated a global boycott of eBay. So, the Catholic Church viewed this as literally the body of Christ once it had been. So, that taught me a valuable lesson, and that is I don't know everything, and no one knows everything. We all come from the different backgrounds, different cultures, different life experiences, and if you're going to make a decision along these lines, you better get input from people with different cultural backgrounds and experiences, right? So, what I did in that particular situation, I immediately set up a team of us. That, global team, people with different backgrounds who started commenting on these sorts of things. And later, when I was at Airbnb, we did the same thing with ethics advisors. So when ethical issues came up that weren't directly covered by the code of ethics, I wasn't the one making the decision alone, although I might be the final word on it. I would actually start listening to what other people would tell me about their perspectives on things. And I can't tell you how many times my initial reaction was to do one thing, and after I heard from a lot of different folks about their perspectives, I ended up changing my mind. And decisions are usually better when you get people from the different backgrounds to start chiming in and helping you think about the problem in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. That's a very powerful story.
Yeah.
Well, eBay got the most interesting. We had items, for example, we had items that were Germany World War II items, for example. And the question came, should we sell something that might have a swastika on it? And one perspective is, well, this is important stuff. This is in museums. We can't pretend that World War II didn't exist. We need these items because they help us understand what happened. On the other hand, do you want to be profiting from the sale of items that have a swastika on it? So that's a complicated question that really needs input from a variety of different places. So the world is full of gray area, interesting issues, and it doesn't matter what business you're in. You're going to have gray sorts of items that you've got to address. And I think not putting the pressure on yourself as the lawyer to have all the right answers alone, and just recognizing that, look, this is gray. And we need to consider some different perspectives to get it right. It's important.
How have you found your approach to those gray areas? How have you found that to have changed over your career?
Well, it is really one that I don't have all the answers, and I think early in my career I thought there was a right answer to things. Right? There's right in the world. There's what is it? The Superman quote. Right. There's right in the world and wrong in the world, and it's easy to tell the difference. Right? Almost like as a federal prosecutor, you're guilty or you're not guilty. There's good and evil. Right. I think what I've learned is that it's not that clear all the time. Yeah. That the world does throw a lot of gray at you, and acknowledge that there's gray, acknowledge that there are challenges, and recognize that you may not have all the answers. So getting that varied input is important, and also understanding it in the company context. Know your mission. Yeah. Know what is your company's North Star. Right. Because I've got my own background, I've got my own principles, I've got my own sense of what integrity is, but I'm just the lawyer. Right. Now, a company has a mission. A company has values. The leader of the company, the founder, often has a powerful impact here. Understanding that, defining that, and making sure that you're making decisions that are aligned and consistent with that mission and culture is really important. Yeah. And not necessarily an easy thing to do. You've got to get some work, put some work into understanding all of that. Now, because a lot of companies don't define it well. Right. They haven't put a lot of time into defining why they exist and what their values are. They've got some vague values that could be anything, but spending a little time on that, I think, really helps. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think earlier in the development of an organization, that you can do that, the easier it is to perpetuate those values throughout your growth stages. And it's one of the things that I know for all of my staff, all of my hiring managers, I make sure that they think about our 4 company values and try to ask questions to see if these values match with the candidate's values.
Mm-hmm. Well, values and culture are hard to change when the company gets big. You can't turn around a big ship like that because everyone who's there has been hired already, right? And the impact has been made. But I remember I was reading about Hewlett and Packard, right? And how they first started, their company in a garage. But when there were only 2 of them, they took the time to write out on one page what their values were. Yeah. And it served as a guiding North Star in everything they did and in who they hired. Mm-hmm. And so there was not a big change that had to happen when they became successful. It was already embedded in everything they did.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a part of the company's DNA at that point.
And one thing I really enjoy doing is spending some time with small companies, helping them maybe have an offsite with leaders to actually help talk about this and tease this stuff out, because doing it early saves a lot of time down the line after success has grown the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know a lot of the folks that listen to Cockpit Counsel, a lot of folks are early in their in-house career, at least. Some lead lawyers, some not. For those who are not, what advice can you give to those folks to try to further perpetuate this concept of integrity and being intentional about integrity, where you don't have that leadership position yet.
Yeah, I mean, again, leaders are the ones that really drive it. But
Yeah.
a lot of times, leaders just haven't thought about it.
Yeah.
And I think, you have an opportunity to influence in this area if the company is open to it and they just haven't thought at all about it, right?
Right.
Now, if there's nothing you could do. I hate to break this to you. If you're at a company like that where the leadership doesn't care about integrity and they're determined to be successful, no matter the means, you can't change the culture of a company like that.
Yeah.
But where you can have a big impact is no one's thought about it, no one's talked about it. And then what if you're the one in the room to just raise your hand and raise a point that raises an ethical or an integrity related issue that no one else has said anything about?
Right.
I think it's actually a good thing to add to your personal brand.
Yeah.
That you're going to be the one in the room that's thinking about these sorts of things and raising it. And you'll find that some places are really receptive. It was just a subject that people were thinking, well, we're here for business, so we're not here to think about that.
Yeah.
They haven't yet connected that business and integrity are actually deeply tied.
Yeah.
And companies that do it well will actually be more successful.
That's right.
So if you can be the one to raise that and talk about it every now and then and raise that perspective, good for your personal brand. It actually helps grow the business. You might find that when you raise it, people are looking at you and it's not welcome.
Right.
But that may be the time to start thinking about finding a place that is more aligned with your values.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And you taught an integrity class at Airbnb. It'd be great to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, when we were thinking about how to drive it into the culture, one of the things that we thought about right on, I was reminded, again, back to my mom. My mom always talked about how first impressions were so important. I said, well, we have an orientation program where all new employees would come to the city, San Francisco, for an orientation week. I said, what better time to talk to people about it than make a great impression right up front? So we started doing an integrity class as part of orientation.
Nice.
It actually turned out to be, they would take all the ratings, and they were very worried about lawyers teaching an integrity class. Number one rated, after a month they came to me and said, we can't believe it, but you actually beat the history of Airbnb class in terms of ratings. And we laughed about it and thought about it a bit. What we found was that the class, it touched people. Because again, people want more than a paycheck. They want to work at a place that they feel really cares about doing the right thing and values. But most of them had never been at a place where it actually had been part of the discussion.
Right.
And it had a powerful impact on people to have the general counsel of the company come in and talk about these things. I remember one powerful moment. It was a 1 hour class where we would take specific examples of things that had actually happened at Airbnb or at places I had been before, strip out the names and use them as specific examples and say, well, what is the right thing to do here? And some of them were pretty tough. But some of them were, I think, not as hard. At the end of the class, a woman came up to me and she was literally in tears telling me. And I was like, oh no, what did I say? What did I do? And she said, Rob, I was working at one of the big tech companies in Silicon Valley. And she said, my boss kept propositioning me, wouldn't stop. Mm-hmm. And she said, I knew if I reported it, nothing would be done. She said, I had to quit my job there. Yeah. She said, this is my first day at my new job. She said, you have no idea what it means to me to have a leader in my new company stand up in front of the room and say that this sort of nonsense won't be tolerated here. Yeah. And that if it is, you can come see him personally.
Right.
And she said, I believe you. And
that's awesome.
It means the world to me.
Yeah.
So it touches people sometimes to be able to talk about this, and getting it right up front kind of sets the tone.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Like I think a lot about my career. I've been really, really fortunate to be at organizations that do, and a lot of people would not think. So the overwhelming majority of my career has been at online gambling companies. All right. But you would not believe, from the CEO, the board members, all the way through the entire organization, everybody wanted to do the right thing. Right. Everybody wanted to act with integrity. Nobody wanted to make money off of someone who's gambling beyond their means, right? We put in programs proactively. Like you think about a number of different regulations within that industry that you have, and like being able to go above and beyond. Like I think there were enough people who like personally didn't gamble themselves at particularly at one of the organizations earlier in my career, but even like that integrity aspect, the fact that they cared about the customer and wanted to do the right thing, was the thing that, even if they were morally opposed to gambling, allowed them to be proud of where they worked.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think particularly when you're at a company where you're in a regulated industry,
Yeah.
I think intelligent leaders realize that it's really important to get it right. If you
Yeah.
want to build a business for the long run,
Yeah.
and build a great business, you have to pay attention to this sort of thing. And so, again, eBay, we thought a lot about it because there were so many regulatory issues. Airbnb
Yep.
had a number of these issues as well. So I think companies are smart
Yeah.
to get beyond the short-term thinking. Recognize that if you get this right, it will actually help your business grow.
Yep.
And so that's a great story around the online gaming world, because
Yeah.
again, you get it wrong in that world, then the world turns against you.
Yes.
And
very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
Very quickly. Yes.
Yeah. Well, we end every episode with some rapid fire questions. So if you're ready,
Okay,
I'll
I'm
ask
ready.
you some. All right. So the first one is, what does a trusted and effective legal leader look like to you?
A trusted, effective legal leader is sought out by the business, even on non-legal issues, right? For me, a legal leader, if they aren't considered a business partner, people start avoiding them. They start seeing the legal leader as someone who's going to say no and stop you from doing things. And so what do? They start finding ways not to go to you.
Right.
So I think for me, a good trusted legal leader has a good perspective, good advice on things, even that aren't necessarily purely legal. And they're sought out because they've got a good perspective, and the business feels as though the lawyer is also a business person, part business person. The lawyer wants the business to succeed. What's different about the lawyer is that they are in the room and they've got legal training. So they're looking at problems from a legal perspective, but they are a business person in that they are aligned with trying to make the business a success and figure out ways to help the business grow. So I think that's the kind of environment that a successful legal leader creates.
Nice. Great answer. What is your hot take on integrity in the workplace?
That it matters in that it will actually help your business grow and be more successful if you get it right. But it's a double-edged sword. You screw it up, it can wreck your brand and wreck your company. I think too often people think of integrity as, integrity's nice. We'll give a donation to the local Little League team at the end of the year, but we're about business. This is about business. And my response to that is, well, I'm about business too. Right. I deeply believe that getting integrity issues right will ultimately make your business more financially successful in the long run.
Great answer. What is the best career advice that you've ever given or received?
Let's see, the best career advice I think I've ever gotten is that career growth isn't linear. Whoever came up with the word career ladder, I think, was existing in the 20th century. If you want your career to grow, be open to different things that may come your way. They may not be legal. There were times where I think Meg Whitman came to me one day and said, Rob, we need a trust and safety department. This was back when I was running North America Legal for eBay. We need a trust and safety department. So we got to stop fraud. It's terrible. I said, Meg, you're absolutely right. Somebody's got to do something about it. She said, I want you to do it. And I said, me? I'm not the right person for it. I'm a lawyer. That was what I said back then. And that's when Meg gave me some really good advice. And she said, stop thinking about yourself as a lawyer. We don't look at you as a lawyer. You're not just a lawyer, right? So I think don't look at yourself in a way that limits you, right? Because great opportunities can come from different directions.
Great answers. Thank you.
All right, Rob, we always ask everybody, what is a cause or charity that's close to your heart that we can help amplify through all of our channels?
I'm glad you asked the question, because I think just asking the question should hopefully amplifies in everybody's mind that it's important to give back. It's important to do something. And all of us ought to be trying to figure out something that we do to give back. There's an organization called Safe and Sound.
Okay.
And Safe and Sound is about security for kids.
Oh, nice.
And because there's awful lot of child abuse actually comes from an insecure family situation.
Right.
So what I love about Safe and Sound is that they're very data driven, but they've come up with an approach that recognizes that if they want to solve the problem of child abuse, they need to solve the stability issue in the family, and they take a very holistic look at supporting a family.
Okay.
So my wife and I both have been really involved with the organization for years, and just love the fact that they've shown so much progress and helped. You're never going to completely eliminate child abuse, but they've made a real impact in the lives of so many families, and it's touched my heart. So I'm glad to support them.
That's awesome. Yeah, and obviously such an ambitious cause, right? To be able to, but the impact of just helping one is
Particularly a child.
it has ripple effects,
And
right?
also,
I mean,
when
it's
you're
an
with a
entire
child,
life. Yeah.
That's when you're in with a child, it feels like an investment.
Right,
Like you've
right.
actually you've had an impact on somebody at a young age who can then make even be better equipped to handle the world, and so it feels really special to me in that sense.
That's awesome. We'll make sure that we, that we're able to get that out through our channels as much as we can, and hopefully drive people to support and take action with the cause.
Terrific.
Great.
Thanks.
Well, Rob, thanks so much for joining us. This is an awesome conversation, and hopefully you'll come back and join us again soon.
Love it. That'd be great. Thanks.
And if you like this episode of Cockpit Counsel, give us a like, give us a follow on all the socials, and we will see you next time. Thanks.